Costco for a price you can't find anywhere else. Just look for the Chrome Razor with 13-blade refills at your local Costco. You can't miss it. Exclusive to Costco members.
The Good Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and online at WGNSradio.com. This is the Roundtable. A look at the news, views, politics, and people that are shaping Rutherford County.
Good morning. This is Bill Kraus on the WGNS Roundtable on a beautiful Thursday morning. And a lovely, lovely day. In fact, every day is a lovely day. It beats the alternative. We are so pleased to have a return visit from a dear friend, a wonderful person, and the Dean of the Humanities and Social Sciences at Motlow State. A lady who couldn't believe it that you're celebrating 10 years at Motlow.
Yes, I actually have been there since 2008.
Oh.
So I started full-time, but when we talked about adjuncts earlier, I adjunct for a long time before I actually took a full-time job with Motlow.
I didn't realize. You almost get back to the time that I began at Motlow in 2003.
Yes, it's
meeting
been a while.
at the military base in Smyrna. Little 2 classes we had at Motlow, and now I think we have, about 2,000 at the Smyrna campus?
Oh, I would say yes, absolutely.
I know you said this before, but a little bit of your background, born where, and where were you raised while you were fishing, and et cetera?
Well, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama,
Oh.
1963, so it was
All
an
right.
interesting...
Oh, 63 was a
yes.
pivot year in Birmingham.
Yes, it was. So I was born in 63. I actually was in one of the first integrated first grade classes when I was 6 years old. So I was actually a part of that. So being born in Birmingham was very interesting.
I imagine the name Bull Connor in 1963.
Oh, absolutely.
Certainly was a landmark in terms of one of the major civil rights conflicts.
It was, absolutely. But for me, it truly was life-changing to experience something that was different in a historical time that really impacted me. I had the ability to meet people that were different from myself.
Yes.
It was just, it changed my life vastly. And so I'm really thankful for the time period for where I was born. On the flip side, we were talking about fishing. I had the wonderful experience of my parents. My grandfather had a place and had the lake, and so we did fishing, and I did gardening, so I actually snapped peas and grew green beans and all those kinds of fun things. So I really had a nice mix growing up, kind of the calm of the country, but the chaos really of the city, and it was chaotic in that time period.
People don't remember who were not alive at that point, or they begin to think, oh, today's times is so bad. You only have to look and live and remember history.
You really, truly do.
In fact, it's kind of interesting. The mid-1960s, you had 2 major events going on. You had the Civil Rights Movement, and you had the anti-Vietnam movement going on at the same time, and both were collision courses, and you wondered how the nation survived, how the nation proceeded. And we did, and we always will.
Right. My brother's actually 10 years older than I am, and so he was eligible for the draft.
Exactly.
I remember very clearly that friends of his went to Vietnam. I always thought it was really interesting. I never understood. He got married the day after he graduated from high school. Now looking back as an adult, I understand that he was less likely to be drafted because he was married. And so I always thought, wow, that's really interesting. So, all of that played in. But I very clearly remember friends of his going to Vietnam, the chaos, the trouble, the frustration. When my brother was in high school, they had riots. I mean, there were all kinds of things that occurred in Birmingham. It was a tumultuous time.
Yes, it was.
And but one that I hope we learned from. For me, emotionally, I think it was impactful. It did make me a more caring person because I saw so much happen.
Exactly.
I grew up with so much. And I think it gave me, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about this later, I think it gave me an internal strength, grit, that I really feel like was essential to my view of the world.
It must have had a significant contribution to you pursuing the psychology journey?
I think so.
When you went as an undergraduate and you went to graduate school, this background intertwined between the rural life, the good, quiet rural life, and the turmoil of the urban, suburban life, and trying to figure out what does it all mean and what can I do to help it?
Oh, absolutely. I think where we go, I traveled a lot when I was young. I was in my early 20s, and I moved to California.
Oh, we're in California.
I lived in the Mojave Desert in a little town called Silver Lakes, near Hellendale, Victorville, Barstow.
All right.
So I moved out there when I was
I did not
24.
realize that.
I did. Yeah.
I taught at Fort Irwin.
Oh, wow.
Which is just above Barstow and Victorville. And
Right,
it's the end of the longest cul-de-sac in the world, 35 miles out into the middle of nowhere off Interstate 15.
So for me, I moved, I think so. Here I grew up in Birmingham. I had the availability to learn how to really, we considered it skill survival because when we had all this snow and ice, we had a busted pipe. We had no water. And so my of course, I have an 18-year-old, and that's pretty traumatic. You have no water. And I was telling them, I said, but when we went to this cabin when I was growing up, we went down and got the lake water and boiled it to take baths, and we boiled it to drink. So I'm like, hey, I'm used to living without water. Let's get us some gallons, and we can do that. So all of those strange things combined, I would say too. Then moving to California, then I moved to Corpus Christi, Texas.
Oh, you really hit different geographic culture.
Yes, and really did, and that impacted me.
That must have to your sociology background.
It does.
With from Birmingham to California to Texas. No, you weren't in New York or Illinois.
No, I did
Midwestern.
not. No, I didn't. I was in Oklahoma for a while. I was in Sapulpa. I worked at a large vet clinic in Sapulpa and worked for the horse races.
Oh, what did you do?
Well, we went out and we just worked on the horses. Like we did the horse surgery. I was an assistant. And so we did horse surgeries. I got to work the rodeo. So we worked on the injured horses.
I wonder how many of your friends and colleagues at Motlow are aware of this background, which I didn't know. And I've known you for a number of years. Oh, this is phenomenal. So you were in the horse business.
I was. I loved it. We, like I said, did large animal surgery. So
you came in this morning with a hoarse voice.
I did.
Sorry. I couldn't resist. I
did. I woke up and you can hear it. I did this morning and thought, oh, man. But so I had this very strange background. I worked for about 2 years in a hospital as a respiratory tech in Oklahoma. And so I was just kind of, I was talking to a lady out here earlier, and she was talking about kids changing their major, trying to decide what they're going to do in life. And I thought, well, it took me the roundabout way really to get to where I was at. But those experiences led me to psychology because I was trying to understand myself. I was trying to understand the world. I tried to understand why people did what they did. And you're right about the sociology. I had been in all kinds of cultures, and I thought, we moved somewhere, like moving somewhere to California, and I talk like this. And at the time, I really talked like this.
Exactly. But in the Mojave, in Lancaster and Palmdale and up through there, a lot of southern and mid-Oklahoma transplants.
There are.
So that's not that distant.
There are. So moving out there, that was an interesting
What
experience.
undergraduate program did you pursue?
Psychology.
At where?
I went to Troy University.
In Alabama?
In Alabama, right.
Wow.
I moved back. I actually got an associate's degree from Jefferson State Community College, and I went into business. I have an associate's degree in labor law and relations, and but that really wasn't what I.
You have a buffet of experience. Phenomenal. I had not known that.
Thank you. And so I really didn't. I don't know. I didn't care for that. I think I mentioned the last time my parents did not want me to be a teacher. I really wanted to be a teacher, but it was the right thing at the time. I would have been an elementary school teacher. And so I went into business because really, they, and I understand their thought process in the 80s. Teachers didn't make a lot of money, couldn't make a living, really.
No, not at all.
And so I did business, and so I did insurance. Insurance traveled with me all over the United States, right, everywhere I went for a long time. But somewhere in the midst of that, when I worked for the insurance company, I just really thought, this is not fulfilling. I was in my 30s. My husband and I, we had just met, and we decided we wanted to be foster parents, and so, all of those things tied together. I really need to understand people better, and so I went back to psychology.
And there's that connection again. To become a foster parent, you need to possibly have a foundation of psychology and sociology.
You do.
I mean, it's amazing. See, I would probably urge everybody to try to connect the dots of your life and start seeing how the dots looking back all have a certain purpose.
I think
and they
so.
have a certain way to proceed. And the dots in your life, Pam, are just phenomenal.
Thank you, and I really do feel like that's the case. I'm a very purpose-driven person. I think sometimes, I know when we talk about college students, I think that's something that they don't feel. They don't feel connections. They often don't know their purpose. They're trying to find it, but it seems like we're more negative maybe in society about that. But for me, I can remember my father always, man, I was so fortunate. I had a great father. He's been gone about 3 years, but yesterday was his birthday.
Oh, my.
And
let's have a second or two of moment of silence to say, you can say, happy birthday, Dad.
thank you.
Great. All right, can't have too much dead air
No,
on,
I
on
agree
the
with
radio
you.
or else.
No. But from my father, I really learned. I was thinking about all the things that he taught me, and he was such a great man. He taught me the fact that material things would come and go, that those were not what mattered, like our pipes burst and our garage has been torn up and all those things. And my dad would always say, what matters, you are loved, that you feel purposed, that you are cared for, and that you're healthy. Now, if you have those things, no matter where you're at, you need to really stop and be grateful for those things. And that has been a really important part of the way I view life. So I feel very fortunate in that. I do think sometimes that probably plays a part in why we see some of the, we were talking about this earlier, why we see so much negativity in our society. I think that it's very hard when people are inundated with negative. How do you find the positive when the world says it's a negative place, it's a bad place, it's a scary place, right?
But it's interesting, and I always will share this with students. We believe there's more crime, there's more negativity. There's a reason for it. When I was growing up in middle school, we used to call them junior high school, high school, and so forth.
I remember junior high.
You had 3 television networks, and they had the news on in the evening, ABC, CBS, NBC. And the average newscast was 1 hour, of which 44 minutes was news, and the remaining 16 minutes were commercials. At that point, the population of the United States was roughly 150 million people.
Wow.
Less than one half of what it is today.
Right.
Criminal justice people will say about 4% of people are bad people. For some reason, the genes or the environment or a whole combination of things. So what would happen is if you had 4% of 150 million, there were roughly 6 million people that could go bad at any time. But you had 44 minutes per night on the evening news to report about those 6%. Today you have over 335 million people in the United States, still with that 4%. So the amount of people who, quote, can be considered a potential criminal justice participant is up to 12 to 13 million. Yet the news time available is still the same amount of time. So a news director and a news staff have to take a look and say, well, this story is a hot story. This story will beat the competition.
Yes.
And consequently, negative news has a more attractive way for a listener than positive. You're halfway asleep on your couch and the 10 o'clock news is about to be on television. And you hear a pre-story and you hear the story saying, dog bites man, details at 10. You're not going to wake up and so forth.
Nope.
On the other hand, man bites dog. I wonder what that's all about. So I'm going to watch the headline news at 10 o'clock. Man bites dog. So negative news is what is influencing, quote, our population.
I think so too.
After Troy, where did you go?
After Troy, I finished out my master's, and when
In psychology?
I did. I finished my master's. Actually, well, it's a master's of arts and teaching, so I have a psychology concentration and I have a sociology concentration. So I have both of those. And then after I got that, I started teaching at the local community college in Alabama. And then my husband and I moved to Huntsville.
Okay.
We were trying to finish the adoption on our youngest child and couldn't leave the state
How
of
many
Alabama.
children have you adopted?
We have adopted two.
Two?
We
Bless
tried to
your
adopt
heart.
3, but we adopted 2.
Bless your heart.
Thank you. Yes, they're wonderful. They're my blessing. And so we were in Huntsville, and so I worked at Alabama A&M for about 2 years doing a tutoring supplemental instruction program there. And then I also did adjunct work teaching psychology for Athens State and for, I don't know, Calhoun, all of the college that were in that area. And I came over into Fayetteville to teach at Motlow.
At Motlow.
That's how I got started at Motlow.
And it was how many students there at the time? Must
Oh,
have been just a handful.
Oh, yes. And in that class, it seems like to me, we only had about 12 students in that class. So I taught, but I loved it. I was able to teach abnormal psychology there. That was one of my favorite classes. So I taught that. At Athens State, I taught cognitive neurology, cognitive science, and that was pretty fascinating too when I was teaching cognitive psychology.
When you mention the word cognitive, that's a word that was not really heard or spoken about or practiced outside the psychology field until recent years, as we have a rapidly growing senior population.
Right.
And we see the measurement, what's the cognitive behavior of that particular individual.
We do.
The ability to rationale, reason decisions, and so forth. And your doctorate was obtained where?
I obtained my doctorate with Capella University.
Oh, excellent school. Strictly, did you defend your dissertation in person or was it online?
No, that was actually
all online.
during COVID. It was actually during COVID.
This is a recent occurrence.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I was telling somebody, I went to a class recently and I was in there speaking with them, and there's some adult students there. And I said, I want to tell you something, that I started back to college at 36, and I just finished my PhD like whatever, 3-4 years ago, whenever COVID was. And I literally did it one class at a time. One class at a time. Now, my master's I did quicker because we needed it to have a job. But my PhD, I literally did one class at a time. I had 2 children at home, working a full-time job and working on my PhD. And so everybody that I see when they ask me something, I go, it is persistence. We need to be like, Finding Nemo, Dory, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, moving, and so I was telling them that the other day. So I think that people relate to that, especially adult students that come back.
I know I've told the story on the air before, and I think I've told the story to you before. And one of the stories about adults going back to school occurred at Motlow in Smyrna, about a lady who had lost her husband after 60 years of marriage. And the family was very concerned that she was really grieving day after day, would not leave the house grieving. And the family said, you ought to go to Motlow, take a class just to get out, see the world. And she was very hesitant to come. Finally, they convinced her. She went into admissions, student success, and they sent her to me as her first class. And they knew I would take her under my arm. I did. And we brought her out, and I kept saying, you have to work towards your AA degree. And she says, well, I'm way up in years, so what good would that do? I said, you want to be at graduation on a particular day, not just for you. You want your grandchildren to see you in cap and gown, that their grandmother, in some respects great-grandmother, is graduating. I said, that is the image you want to create. She has graduated from Motlow State.
Right.
And with that picture.
For me, mine was about, I wanted my dad to see. I was the first one that ever had a doctorate in my family. Wow. I was a first-generation college student. And so my goal was, and I knew Dad was getting older, and my dad was able to see me graduate. He knew me as Dr. Harris right before he passed away. So that was one of those really... I don't know. That was a very gracious thing in my life, is that my dad was able to go. He was so proud of that.
He has a total right to be.
in a cotton mill. You know, he did go on to work for the highway department, but he worked in a cotton mill, and he worked in Michigan one time on the factory lines for the cars. He walked, literally, when they say people walk 7 miles in the snow, my mother and father moved to Michigan because Elliott City was a cotton mill town.
Yes.
They moved thinking they'd make more money. My brother was a year old. They were early 20s, and they moved, and the cousin they drove up to Michigan with decided they needed to come back home and left my parents there. I don't know why my parents didn't come back with them, but my dad literally got out in the snow in Michigan from November to April and walked to work. To work. So you talk about learning determination, about being things are really truly hard. My daddy knew hard, you know, and we talked about that. So he walked to work. Now, my mother always says, when I saw the ground in April, we got our taxes back, and they bought a car, and they came home.
And they came, and they didn't walk again.
She's never left Alabama.
I understand. Well, you know, you mentioned getting your doctorate at a later chapter of life. My chapter, I got my doctorate while working full-time as a city manager, growing family of 3 kids, life very busy. And I was so proud the day, it was on a Friday, the graduation at USC, to get my doctorate. So some dear friends wanted to take us out to dinner that Sunday to celebrate the doctorate. And I was saying, you can call me Dr. Kraus. You can call me Dr. Kraus. So proud of the doctor. So we went into this restaurant, true story. And we got there a little early, and the hostess said, and may I have your name? I said, Dr. Bill Kraus. Well, the 1 in a million thing occurred. We're having dinner with other folks, having a wonderful time, and 3 servers run over. Are you a doctor? We need you right now.
Doctor in the house.
We have a man choking.
Oh, no.
Choking and eating something and choke. I said, I'm not that kind of doctor. But we need you. You're a doctor. So I did, thank goodness, know the Heimlich. And I was able to Heimlich the individual, and out popped the piece of roast beef, and he was fine. Believe it or not, Pam, I have never introduced myself ever since as Dr. Kraus, because I'm not going to be called for house calls, medical.
Right?
So it's interesting how life will turn and how things will occur.
It is.
Let's talk about the psychology today of students. Now, This is very general in discussion. We may be focusing on Motlow State. Motlow State has a demographic, certainly of rural in parts of its campuses, and suburban, for example, as Smyrna, Murfreesboro feeds into this campus. So what we say is not necessarily universal to colleges and universities throughout the country. But how would you evaluate the psychological health, the emotional health of men and women today?
I think it's a real struggle. I think that one of the things that we can say in general, we do know statistically about college students, is their social anxiety is at a all-time high level. Generalized anxiety is at a all-time high level. I think there are multiple factors to that. I think that students, there are many things that have factored in. I believe in that, but I do think that isolation has played a huge part in that. When we look at, like, even if I take, for example, my son, he was in school, in high school during COVID, and students were so isolated from one another that they didn't make those essential connections that they need. I also think that they are at high levels because we're inundated. When you were talking about social media, we're inundated with that. I saw this really interesting meme the other day. It showed a phone, and it said, when man was connected to this, man was free.
Let's hold that thought for a moment, because I think you're right on to something that affects not only students, parents, fellow employees, grandparents, but the entire society. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Hey, it's Scott. When it comes to health, there are numbers that every man needs to know, including your testosterone number. I recommend Low T Center, where they make it quick and easy to get your levels checked, and it's only $25. You walk in, take a simple blood test, and with their on-site lab, you'll get your results in about 25 minutes. Low T levels can make you feel tired and grumpy. They can cause a lack of motivation and drive. It can raise your cholesterol, cause weight gain, and loss of muscle mass. Go to lowtcenter.com right now to book your appointment online. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare.
This is Good Neighbor Events with Bart Walker. Brought to you by AmeriCare Pest Control and the law offices of John Day.
This is a paid legal ad.
When a family member is lost as a result of someone else's negligence, the grief can be unbearable. It also leaves you with a lot of questions like, how did this happen? Who's responsible? And is my family going to be okay? That's a lot to go through, but with the law offices of John Day on your side, you don't have to go through any of it alone. We understand what you're going through, and we have the experience to get the answers, justice, and compensation your family deserves. Call the law offices of John Day.
Well, let's check those WGNS Good Neighbor events. Murfreesboro's Battle of the Bands is this Saturday night at the Patterson Community Center. The best local bands in our community competing for the big awards. The fun begins at 6 o'clock this Saturday night at the Patterson Community Center. Maybe you're new to town and want to meet some people and learn more about the history of the community. The Rutherford County Historical Society invites you to come on over to the one-room Ransom Schoolhouse this Saturday morning from 9 until noon. It's all free, including the coffee and donuts. Ransom School is at 717 North Academy Street. Perhaps you got a new computer for Christmas and you want to learn how to really make it work. The Rutherford County Library System is offering free computer classes on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays classes are from 3:30 until 5, and Tuesdays it's from 2:30 to 3:30, and they're all at the Technology Engagement Center. Anastasia continues at the Art Center of Cannon County. And those are WGNS Good Neighbor events.
Good Neighbor weather.
We'll see partial sunshine developing here this afternoon, a high in the upper 50s. Southwest winds at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, mostly cloudy, a low near 36. I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki on News Radio WGNS. Currently, it's 31.
Broadcasting from the Middle Tennessee Electric Studios, MTE Sharing Change has now donated more than $11 million to local nonprofits, assisting worthy causes in our community. MTE, serving to make life better since 1936.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and worldwide at WGNSradio.com.
Bill Kraus here again on the Roundtable on Thursday morning on WGNS, and we are having a delightful conversation. Excuse me, there's that horse again.
It is this morning, right?
Delightful conversation with Dr. Pam Harris, who is the Dean of Social Sciences, and really, I have to say more than just humanities and social science. She's a motivation, a symbol, a spark plug for the entire Motlow State Community College.
Thank
We were talking about the, quote, the young men and women, I can't just say young, men and women today who are going to school, and you talked about the anxiety. Was the anxiety building up during the lockdowns in the middle of COVID-19? Because I was thinking on the way here, driving opposite to the traffic on I-24 heading toward Nashville, and if people were working from home rather than commuting on bumper to bumper, start and stop on I-24, would their anxiety levels actually have been reduced from having not have to drive with that traffic into downtown Nashville? So you were describing the anxiety and stress levels based upon how people perceive and acknowledge events around them, both in their community, state, and nation, and world.
I think it's been a accumulation of many things. In my lifetime, I know I'm 60, and so we talked about I was born in 63. So in my lifetime, I think things were fairly difficult. I started working when I was 14 for $2 an hour, and been
That's
working.
big money.
Well, it was.
Yes,
I thought
it was.
Hey, I thought I was doing well, and I really was. But and so I've been working a long time. I was really, truthfully, an adult at 14. I mean, my parents let me come and go. We didn't have cell phones, so it was kind of that trust thing. So we really learned a lot of skills, I think, for ourselves, and so they really emphasized that. So I think the time period has been different. We came along, and my parents were kind of that generation that said, well, you take care of yourself. And like my parents never. I was a cheerleader. I was in volleyball. I played softball. I went to state championships in singing, and my parents never saw me. Right. So it was that generation where you just kind of, I don't want to say took care of yourself.
Sure.
Right. But that gave me some strengths and skills that I think, as when my group and the group, like my husband's in his 50s, when we became parents, I think we, in a lot of ways, we really overdid. We tried to give our children things we didn't have. We didn't have.
Make up for the loss.
We did. And I think in that we didn't help them shore up their independence. I don't think we gave them the choices they should have had, because we were trying, it's like we were trying to make up.
Sure.
So I think some of that has played a part in what we see for social anxiety. Our children have become more dependent. They stay home longer. So I think there's just this culmination of things. And then, right before we went to commercial, we were talking about the fact of when we were not tied to a cell phone.
Exactly.
I love my cell phone. Now, I will say that I can know where my children are at. I know they're safe, all of those kinds of things. But on the flip side of that, this really, right, when you don't allow that progression, in my opinion at least, when you don't allow that, you should. And that desire